Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. Living alone at 26 has its own rules, especially when you're a freelance photographer who works odd hours and forgets things all the time. My little brick duplex on Birch Avenue had been my safe haven for nearly 2 years, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood where the biggest drama was usually someone's cat getting stuck on a roof. My landlord, an older man named Harold, lived 3 states away and didn't care what I did as long as the rent showed up on time. The spare key under the ceramic frog planter by my front door was my safety net, a habit I'd carried since college. I'd locked myself out so many times that it just became routine. That Friday in October started like any other, except the weather turned nasty around noon. The rain came down in sheets while I was shooting an outdoor wedding that got forced indoors last minute. Everyone was stressed, and I was soaked, even with an umbrella. By the time I got home around 9 that night, my fingers were so numb I could barely hold my keys. The porch light was already on, which was strange because I remembered turning it off that morning to save power. When I turned the knob, the door opened easily. It wasn't locked. I sighed, assuming I'd just forgotten again. But something felt off the moment I stepped inside. The air seemed heavier, like the space had been disturbed. The living room lamp, the one that only worked if you jiggled the switch just right, was glowing, throwing long shadows across my camera gear in the corner. My laptop was closed on the coffee table, even though I'd left it open with my editing software running. The couch pillows were neatly arranged, which I never did, and my coffee mug from that morning. It was clean, sitting in the drying rack. My cat, Phantom, usually sprinted to greet me at the door, yowling like I'd been gone for days. But tonight, he was crouched under the dining table, fur puffed up, eyes wide. When I reached for him, he hissed, and bolted upstairs. He'd never done that before. Rain slammed against the windows, and somewhere above me, I heard faint thuds, footsteps maybe, but I told myself it was just the storm or old pipes rattling. Then I went into the kitchen, and that's where it got worse. Every cabinet door was cracked open a few inches, all perfectly even. My knife block had one empty slot. The chef's knife I'd used that morning to cut an apple was missing. The trash can had been moved to the middle of the floor, and inside were things I didn't recognize: an empty soup can I'd never bought, a crumpled gas station receipt from 20 miles away, and a pair of latex gloves turned inside out. My stomach dropped. Upstairs, my bedroom door was closed. I never closed it. Phantom liked to wander in and out. From the hallway, I could hear something behind the door. Slow, steady breathing. It took me a minute to realize that's what it was. My brain tried to rationalize it, but my body knew. Every instinct screamed run. I reached for the doorknob. It was freezing cold. The breathing stopped. I opened the door. Sitting on the edge of my bed was a man, maybe in his 40s, wearing a soaked windbreaker and jeans. His hair clung to his head, dripping water onto my carpet. In his lap was my missing knife, and he was calmly running his thumb along the blade. When he looked up, his eyes were pale and empty, like frozen water. He didn't flinch or look surprised. He just smiled softly. "You're home earlier than usual," he said, like we knew each other. The wedding must have wrapped up quick. My heart dropped. He knew where I'd been. He knew my schedule. This wasn't random. He'd been watching me, learning my habits, maybe for months. He stood up slowly, still holding the knife. "I've been keeping the place tidy for you," he said. "You're always so tired." The dishes were piling up. His voice was calm, almost gentle, which made it even worse. Phantom yowled somewhere behind me, a deep, terrified sound. My phone was in my pocket, but I didn't dare reach for it. The man stepped closer, close enough that I could smell him. Rain, cigarettes, and something chemical, like cough syrup. "I made soup," he said quietly. "It's still warm. You haven't been eating right." That was it. I bolted. Down the stairs, sliding on the wood, trying not to fall. His footsteps followed, unhurried, steady. When I reached the front door, it was dead-bolted from the inside. My keys were upstairs in my camera bag. I sprinted to the kitchen door. It was jammed. He'd done something to it. He appeared in the doorway, knife dangling casually from his hand. "I grew up in this house," he said, almost wistful. "My parents owned it for 30 years. I still have all the original keys." He pulled a ring from his pocket, dozens of keys jingling together. "That ceramic frog was my mother's. She kept her spare key there too." While he stared around the kitchen, lost in nostalgia, I grabbed a chair, climbed up, and smashed the window above the sink. The glass shattered, slicing my sleeve. Rain poured in. He didn't stop me, just watched, disappointed, as I forced myself through the frame and fell into the muddy flower bed outside. I ran barefoot to the neighbor's house, screaming for help. Behind me, the back door opened and his calm voice floated out. "I'll see you tomorrow, then." The police found evidence he'd been living in my home for at least 6 months. Receipts in the attic, a sleeping bag in the crawl space, and a journal logging my daily routine. His name was Gregory Dalton. He'd been watching me entering while I was gone, taking photos. Harold, my landlord, was stunned. He'd thought all the locks were new. Turns out the inner mechanisms were from the 1960s, original. Gregory's mother really had owned that ceramic frog. When he saw it still there decades later, something inside him broke. He'd hidden extra keys around the property, inside a fake rock, under a loose brick, even in the garage rafters. I moved out a week later, into a secure apartment with a digital lock and no spare keys anywhere. Gregory got 5 years for stalking and breaking and entering. But that's not what haunts me. What keeps me awake is knowing that for half a year, while I thought I was safe, he was there, washing my dishes, sitting on my bed, watching me sleep. The police found over 300 photos on his computer, including some taken while I was in bed. Sometimes I still wake up at 3 a.m., sure I can hear breathing that isn't mine. Phantom never recovered. He hides from everyone and won't go near windows. Last week, I got a letter from Gregory in prison. I didn't open it, just handed it to the police, but I saw the handwriting on the envelope. My name written carefully, and underneath, in smaller letters, I kept the house so nice for you. They say he'll be moved to a psychiatric facility soon. But that doesn't comfort me, because now I know, the real horror isn't when someone breaks into your home. It's realizing they never thought they were breaking in at all. Last Friday night changed everything about how I see crowds, how I trust people in uniform, and why I'll never ignore my instincts again. The Riverside Arena downtown was hosting an indie rock show I'd been dying to see for months. My roommate Ashley bailed last minute with a stomach bug, but since I'd already paid for the ticket, I decided to go alone. The place was packed, wall to wall, with about 3,000 people inside that converted warehouse. It was loud, electric, and full of energy. The opening band had just finished and the crowd was buzzing, waiting for the main act, a Portland-based group that had been blowing up recently. I was standing near the middle, close enough to see the stage but with a clear view of the main entrance. I was texting Ashley a picture of the crowd when everything went wrong. The fire alarm exploded through the speakers, a deafening, industrial screech that made my whole body tense up. People looked around confused, some laughing, others recording with their phones, assuming it was a prank. Then a group of security guards appeared. Not the usual ones I recognized from other shows. These wore black uniforms with reflective vests and moved through the crowd fast, shouting over the noise and waving flashlights. "Emergency evacuation! Move to the rear exit! Stay calm but move quickly!" They repeated the same thing again and again, voices sharp and commanding. I've been to enough concerts to know where all the exits usually are, but this was different. They weren't leading us to the main doors, or the obvious side exits. Instead, they were pushing us toward the back of the building, into an area I'd never seen open to the public before. I hesitated, my gut screaming that something wasn't right. The green exit signs I knew led outside were being ignored. The guards kept forcing us deeper into the building. A girl next to me, maybe college-age, purple hair, nose ring, grabbed my arm to steady herself and shouted over the noise, asking one of the guards why we weren't using the normal exits. He didn't even look at her, just kept saying, "Keep moving." Emergency protocol. Rear exit only. His voice sounded mechanical, rehearsed. As we moved through the back corridors, the air changed. It smelled stale and metallic, like rust and dust that hadn't been disturbed in years. The hallway was narrow, concrete on both sides, cold enough that goosebumps rose on my arms. The further we went, the quieter the fire alarm became, muffled by the walls and distance, which made no sense. Shouldn't we have been heading outside? The crowd pressed forward, hundreds of bodies packed tight. Every 20 feet or so, a guard stood against the wall, their flashlights cutting through the dim space. The fluorescent lights above were old and flickering, leaving long shadows. Someone's phone light swept over the ceiling, revealing pipes, insulation, and years of grime. The purple-haired girl whispered to her boyfriend that this didn't feel like an evacuation. He nodded, his face tight. We'd been walking for at least 5 minutes when the corridor split into 2 tunnels. The guards began dividing us randomly, some people going left, others right. The girl and her boyfriend got pushed left. I went right. That's when real panic started to set in. Evacuations don't separate people. They don't lead you deeper underground. I could hear faint voices from the other tunnel fading away as ours kept descending. The walls were damp now, water trickling down, and the air was thick, like we were breathing through a filter. A man ahead of me tried to ask a guard where we were going, and the guard shoved him forward without answering. That's when I really looked at their faces. Their features were off somehow. Too similar. Too still. Their eyes were wide and completely black, no whites, no reflections. I pulled out my phone. 1 bar of service. I dialed 911, but instead of connecting, I heard static mixed with what sounded like breathing. Around me, others were trying too. Their screens all said, "Emergency calls only," or "No service." We were in the middle of the city, yet it felt like we were miles underground. The corridor narrowed again until we were moving single file. The walls vibrated faintly under my hands, as if some kind of machinery was running behind them. People were starting to cry, shout, beg to turn back. The guards didn't react, just kept us moving. A woman ahead of me suddenly screamed for her daughter. She'd been separated into the other tunnel. 2 guards grabbed her by the arms and dragged her forward while she kicked and yelled. Nobody dared intervene. The floor started sloping downward, the air heavier and hotter with each step. Water dripped somewhere ahead, echoing like a metronome. We must have walked nearly half a mile before the lights went out, all of them. Total blackness. People screamed and shoved, panic ripping through the crowd. The guards' flashlights snapped on again, their beams slicing through the darkness in harsh, disorienting bursts. Someone fell near me. I heard bones crack, and I couldn't stop to help, or I'd be trampled. Then the guards started chanting. Not English, not anything human. The low rhythmic sound echoed through the tunnel, vibrating in my chest. Heavy metal doors slammed shut behind us, one after another sealing us in. Boom, boom, boom. When the chanting stopped, the silence was worse. All I could hear was hundreds of terrified people breathing. Then red lights flickered on, flooding the space in a bloody glow. We were in a huge concrete chamber, maybe the size of a gym. Rows of metal folding chairs faced a small platform. The guards began forcing us to sit. There were already people in some of the chairs, completely still, facing forward. They looked normal at first, wearing regular clothes, but they didn't move, not even when we screamed or cried. They looked empty. A guard shoved me into a seat. The metal was freezing. There were straps on the armrests, not fastened yet. The woman next to me grabbed my hand, whispering, "This can't be real." A man in a spotless white suit stepped onto the platform. His face was shadowed except for his wide, toothy smile. "Welcome," he said, voice echoing from everywhere at once. "To recruitment." My blood ran cold. He talked about purpose, about how we'd been selected. Based on our data, our habits, our Friday night routines. Behind him, a projector lit up the wall with strange corporate logos. Nexus Solutions, Paradigm Collective. Companies I'd never heard of. He spoke like a preacher, describing human optimization and integration into the collective workforce. Around me, the people who'd been sitting motionless began to move in eerie unison, turning their heads toward us. Their pupils were blown wide, faces slack. The The woman next to me suddenly stood up, her movements jerky and unnatural, walked to the front row, and sat down. Completely still again, others began following her one by one. Then, suddenly, the real fire alarm went off. The sharp, modern siren cut through the chanting and static. Sprinklers triggered above us. Water poured down from cracks in the ceiling. The man in white faltered, his perfect smile breaking. The guards looked confused for the first time. Real smoke started seeping into the room. Someone had set an actual fire. Maybe on purpose, maybe by accident, but it broke the spell. People surged up, running for the doors. The guards tried to stop us, but panic took over. I ran with the crowd, shoving through the tunnels, following exit signs that hadn't been visible before. We burst out through a loading dock into the cold night air, gasping and soaked. Fire trucks were already there, lights flashing red and blue. Real firefighters, real sirens, real safety. They looked stunned as hundreds of people poured out of an area they thought was empty. The official story said a prank alarm caused confusion, pushing concertgoers into restricted tunnels. The venue got shut down for code violations, and we all got refunds. But out of 3,000 people, only about 300 made it out. The rest, including the purple-haired girl and her boyfriend, were never found. Police claimed they left through other exits, but every bit of security footage was corrupted. The security company doesn't exist. Those corporations the man mentioned, Nexus Solutions and Paradigm Collective, they're real. They own dozens of venues across the country. I tried posting about it online, but the posts vanished within hours. Twice, I've noticed men in black uniforms watching my apartment from across the street. I moved cities, changed numbers, deleted social media, but sometimes I still hear that chanting in my dreams. Now I avoid crowds. No concerts, no movies, no packed venues, because I know the truth. The real danger isn't the fire or the panic. It's the people who pretend to save you, while leading you straight into something that doesn't have a name, but definitely has a purpose. That Friday night started out just like any other shift. I was finishing up my delivery route for one of those big name companies, the kind everyone recognizes. My route that evening in late November was the Southeastern District. Mostly quiet neighborhoods and a few office complexes that stayed open late. After 2 years on the job, the van felt like a second home, with its familiar cardboard smell and that one squeaky wheel that always groaned when I turned left. By 11:30, I only had one package left, some electronics going to an address near the old factory district. My wife, Jessica, had texted earlier asking when I'd be home. Our daughter, Lily, couldn't sleep without her bedtime story from Daddy. I texted back, promising I'd be home by midnight, maybe 12:30 at the latest. In 34 years, I'd never broken a promise to her, and I didn't plan to start that night. The highway stretched ahead like a black ribbon, streetlights glowing every 100 feet. My usual exit, Cranbrook Road, would have taken me straight home in 20 minutes, but I missed it. My mind was on Lily, not the signs. By the time I noticed, I'd gone 3 miles too far and saw the sign for Millwater Junction. No big deal, I thought. The GPS showed a route through the industrial district, could actually shave off a few minutes. Looked easy enough. Just a few turns through what used to be the city's manufacturing hub before everything shut down. At that hour, it was deserted. The first 10 minutes were fine. Just me, the hum of the engine, and the echo bouncing off old warehouse walls. Then my GPS started glitching. The blue dot jumped across the screen before freezing completely. My signal dropped to 1 bar, then none. GPS signal lost. It read. Great. I pulled over near an old textile factory. The place looked dead. Windows boarded up, fences rusted, one weak streetlight buzzing overhead. My headlights hit an empty loading dock and broken concrete. Then I saw him, someone standing next to a white panel truck about 50 feet ahead. He was smoking, just standing there. Not doing anything strange, but seeing anyone out there that late made my stomach tighten. He wore dark work clothes, navy or black, and started walking toward me. His steps were slow, steady, deliberate. When he reached my window, I rolled it halfway down, keeping the engine running. His face was weathered, maybe mid-50s, with gray stubble and tired eyes. Lost. he asked in a raspy smoker's voice. I told him I'd missed my exit, that my GPS had died, and asked how to get back to the highway. He thought for a second, glancing down both ends of the street. Yeah, I know these roads. Worked around here 15 years doing night maintenance, he said, flicking his cigarette. Best way's actually straight ahead. Can't turn back now. One-way streets for the delivery trucks. I can show you. I'm heading that direction anyway. Before I could reply, he was already walking around to the passenger door. The handle clicked, and suddenly he was sitting beside me, bringing with him the smell of oil and tobacco. Name's Carl, he said, buckling up. Just drive straight. I'll tell you when to turn. My gut twisted. Something felt off, but I didn't want to be rude or paranoid. I started driving. He looked around the van, taking in the packages, the scanner, my phone still frozen on that useless, searching for signal screen. For a while, it was quiet except for his directions. Left here. Keep straight. The streets got narrower, darker, not one working streetlight in sight. The buildings leaned in closer, casting long shadows. Then Carl said, "You know, most drivers don't come through here anymore. Not since that thing with the other delivery guy." "What thing?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He gave this dry laugh. "Oh, nothing proven. Guy just vanished one night. They found his van 2 weeks later. All the packages were still there, just no driver." He pointed. "Bear left here. Trust me." That word, trust, hit wrong. Every turn seemed to take us deeper into nowhere. I glanced at the clock, 11:47. We'd been driving nearly 10 minutes without seeing a single sign for the highway. "Shouldn't we have hit a main road by now?" I asked. He shifted in his seat, fingers twitching near the lock button. "These old roads are tricky," he said, tone a little too calm. "Just a bit further. Take the next right." But where he pointed wasn't a road. It was a narrow alley, barely wide enough for my van. I stopped cold. "I'm not going down there," I said. "This isn't the way to the highway. Where are you taking me?" The fake friendliness dropped from his face, replaced by something cold. Then, just as fast, he forced a wounded smile. "Hey, I'm helping you. My brother's got a warehouse just past this alley. Shortcut to the on-ramp. Your little girl's waiting, right? Bedtime story." Hearing him mention Lily again, after I'd only said it once, froze me. He'd been listening too closely. That's when I threw the van in reverse and hit the gas. Carl shouted, grabbing the wheel. "What are you doing?" He barked, trying to turn off the ignition. We struggled. His taped-up fingers clawing for the keys, his breath hot and sour. My hand found the delivery scanner. I swung hard. The device hit the side of his head with a dull thud. Blood started running down his temple, but he just smiled, slow and eerie. "You have no idea where you are," he said quietly. "Good luck finding your way out." Then he stepped out, calm as ever, and walked into the dark, whistling. I slammed the locks and just sat there shaking. My phone was still dead, the GPS still blank, and Carl knew exactly where I was. For 2 hours, I drove aimlessly through that maze of empty streets. Every sound made me flinch. Twice I thought I saw his white truck behind me, always just far enough away that I couldn't be sure. Finally, around 2 a.m., I spotted the glow of a gas station. The attendant saw me pull up and immediately asked if I needed help. I told him I'd gotten lost, left out the part about Carl. He let me use the landline to call Jessica. Hearing her voice almost broke me. The police took a report, but I couldn't describe exactly where I'd been. The roads didn't match up on any map. The officer said they'd had similar stories. Drivers led deeper into the industrial district by someone offering help. No proof, no suspects. They never found Carl or his truck. I quit 3 weeks later. Couldn't handle late night routes anymore. Every time I saw a white van or passed an old factory, my heart raced. Jessica said she'd rather have me safe and home than scared on the road. Sometimes I search forums, delivery driver boards, trucking threads, and find others with almost the same story. A man with taped fingers, a white panel truck, a maze of streets that don't exist in daylight. Now, when Lily asks me to check her closet for monsters, I do, because I learned that night the real monsters don't always hide under the bed. They wait outside smiling, offering help, leading you exactly where you don't want to go. The divorce had been finalized for about 2 months when Kevin called me out of the blue on a Wednesday afternoon in late September. 27 years old and already divorced, not exactly how I pictured my life going. I was living in a tiny studio apartment that still smelled like the previous tenant's cats, eating takeout straight from the container most nights. Kevin and I had been college roommates for 3 years, and hearing his voice after almost 5 years of nothing but birthday texts and the occasional Facebook like caught me completely off guard. He said he'd heard about the split with Melissa and wanted to help me take my mind off things. A weekend at his family's cabin up north. Fishing, beer, and old college stories. Honestly, it sounded like exactly what I needed to get out of my post-divorce fog. The drive up that Friday took me through miles of thick pine forest that grew denser the farther I got from the city. My GPS gave up about 40 miles out, so I followed Kevin's handwritten directions. The road ended in a rough dirt trail that my car barely managed. The cabin sat tucked deep in the woods, surrounded by trees so thick I couldn't see more than 20 feet in any direction. Kevin greeted me at the door with that same crooked grin from college, though his hairline had receded and he'd put on a few pounds. He grabbed my bag and gave me a tour. 2 bedrooms upstairs, a cozy living area with a stone fireplace, and a surprisingly modern kitchen with brand new appliances that looked way too expensive for such a rustic place. At the end of the hall was a white door with deep scratches near the handle, like someone had tried breaking in. Kevin noticed me staring and quickly steered me toward the back deck, saying his dad kept hunting gear down there. Nothing but dusty old equipment. That first night started perfectly. We grilled steaks on the deck, cracked open a 12-pack of cheap beer, and laughed about the time we almost got expelled for taking the Dean's golf cart for a joyride. But every so often, Kevin would glance at his phone, jaw tightening before forcing a laugh and changing the subject. Around 10 p.m., after a few too many whiskeys, I asked about his job. He mumbled something about freelance consulting, between projects, he said, and then suggested we turn in early. The guest room upstairs smelled musty, like it hadn't been used in a long time. The radiator clanged every few minutes, and the window looked out into pitch black woods. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to use the bathroom and heard Kevin talking downstairs. His voice low and tense. Something about tomorrow night, and everything needs to be ready. Through the floorboards I could hear him pacing, the old wood creaking with each step. When I finally got up, the noise stopped. The house went completely silent except for the radiator. Just before I fell back asleep, I thought I heard a car engine start in the distance. Strange, considering the nearest neighbor was supposedly miles away. By morning, Kevin was in the kitchen cooking breakfast, acting perfectly normal. He smiled, 2 wide eyes shadowed with dark circles. When I mentioned hearing him on the phone, he laughed it off, saying his girlfriend had called about roommate drama. Funny thing was, when he invited me, he said he was single. Before I could question it, he changed the subject and suggested we hike to the lake. The trail to the lake was barely visible, more like an animal path, but Kevin knew every turn. Halfway there, we passed an old cabin with boarded-up windows and a tarp on the roof. I noticed fresh tire tracks in the mud and what looked like smoke marks on the chimney. Kevin brushed it off, saying hunters sometimes used abandoned spots illegally. The lake was beautiful, still water surrounded by tall pines, but Kevin kept checking his phone, typing something into his notes when he thought I wasn't looking. Back at the cabin around 4 p.m., he said he was starting dinner early. I watched from the window as he went to his truck and pulled out a heavy black duffel bag that hadn't been there before. Instead of bringing it through the front door, he carried it around back. I heard the storm cellar slam, an entrance I hadn't even noticed until then. When he came back in, he was sweating and had dirt under his nails. He told me dinner was at 8 and said a couple of local friends were joining us. Guys who wanted to meet his old college buddy. When they arrived, I knew right away something was off. Doug was huge, 6'4", built like a linebacker, with a tattoo in a foreign language on his neck. Rodrigo was smaller, lean, and coldly precise, with gray eyes that barely blinked. They both shook my hand too long, staring like they were studying me. They didn't eat, just drank beer while asking weirdly personal questions. Did I have family nearby? Travel for work? When was the last time I'd posted online? Had I told anyone where I was this weekend? That last one hit hard. I hadn't. Kevin had told me to unplug. After an hour of tense small talk, Doug stood up and said, "Let's get started." Kevin froze. Rodrigo showed him something on his phone, and Kevin went pale. He started stammering about needing more time, but Doug clamped a massive hand on his shoulder until Kevin shut up. Then Rodrigo looked at me and calmly explained Kevin owed them 78,000 from gambling. The family cabin wasn't his. He'd rented it under a fake name. Their plan was simple. They needed someone with a clean record to drive a car across the Canadian border Sunday night. A car with a hidden compartment. The duffel bag, Rodrigo said, held the tools they'd used to modify it. I'd been chosen because I fit their perfect profile. Recently divorced, no one expecting me back right away, and desperate for distraction. If I cooperated, Kevin's debt would be erased, and I'd get a 10,000. If not, well, they knew my address, my job, even where my ex-wife and parents lived. I said I needed to think and asked to use the bathroom. Rodrigo gave me 5 minutes. The small window above the toilet opened onto the porch roof. I almost climbed out. Until I heard Doug outside talking on the phone, saying to watch the road in case he runs. That's when I realized the second cabin we'd passed probably wasn't abandoned. Someone was stationed there. This had all been planned. I walked back into the room and picked up the car key Rodrigo had slid toward me. Then, calmly, I pulled out my phone and started recording. I spoke clearly, naming all 3 of them, describing Kevin's debt and the smuggling plan. Everything. Doug lunged for me, but I'd already hit upload. Even if you delete it, I said, it's backed up in the cloud. Rodrigo's cold stare flicked toward Kevin, full of disgust. Within minutes, they left, but not before Doug shoved Kevin hard against the wall and Rodrigo warned me that I'd made enemies. I spent the night locked in my car, engine running until daylight. Then I drove straight to the nearest police station and filed a report. Kevin vanished after that. His phone disconnected. Social media gone, the cabin listing wiped from the rental site. Police said without solid evidence, there wasn't much they could do, but they kept my statement. It's been months now. I still get the occasional unknown call, but I never answer. I've moved twice since then, and I never found out what they planned to smuggle across that border. And honestly, I don't want to.